We were putting together a video about the Sierra Nevada, the standard material, the alpine lakes, and the granite domes everyone already photographs, when we found a note about a single carving that faces the wrong way, not out, toward a person standing in front of it. Up, at the sky, alone on top of a boulder, 5 miles from any other rock art in the area, in a place the people who know about it refuse to name. That stopped us. We kept pulling the thread. One name led to another, and then to a legal case, and then to a mummy, and then to a canyon the US Navy has been guarding for 80 years. 14 sites later, here is what we found. We did not expect a 300-foot mountain that a highway crew drilled 2 tunnels straight through, knowing full well the people who lived there held it sacred. We did not expect a single slab of stone worn with 1,185 holes, none of them carved. We did not expect geometric designs on a dead Nevada lake bed that may be older than the pyramids. But the one that made us feel we had to make this video. That is number 1. Stay with us. This is what we do here. We follow the threads other people drop and see where they go. Subscribe if that sounds like something you want more of. Today, we are counting down 14 ancient sites in the Sierra Nevada no one can fully explain. Number 14 sits above a dry lake bed on the east side of the Sierra near Owens Lake in Inyo County, California. You reach it off Highway 136, headed toward Death Valley, and then you walk out onto ground that was underwater when the last ice age ended. The beaches here were still being pounded by waves around 15,000 years ago. Now there is no water for miles. Ancestral Paiute pecked images into the desert-varnished marble and basalt above the old shoreline. Most of it is what you would expect from Owens Valley, which holds thousands of petroglyphs, cataloged in the foundational survey by Heiser and Baumhoff back in 1962. One panel is not. A local researcher argued that a cluster here works as a calendar. Near the equinox, the sun drops behind the Sierra crest, and a shadow crosses a 6-bar glyph, 1 bar per day. Accurate, he claimed, to within a few days. No one has proven it. It has never held up in peer-reviewed work, so it stays where it is, a stone that may or may not keep time, above a lake that dried up before anyone alive was born. Maybe someone lined it up on purpose. Maybe the desert just does that. Both are worth the drive. Number 13 is the one you have probably already seen a video about. The wrong video. Lovelock Cave sits in the Great Basin, south of the town of Lovelock, Nevada. In 1911, 2 men named David Pugh and James Hart were digging bat guano out of it to sell as fertilizer when they hit prehistoric artifacts. Proper excavations followed. Llewellyn Loud in 1912, Mark Harrington in the 1920s. The cave turned out to be one of the richest archaeological sites in North America. More than 10,000 objects, dated by radiocarbon to as far back as 2000 BC. Duck decoys, often called the oldest in the world. Then came the giants. Paiute oral tradition tells of the Saitesa. The phrase means tool eaters. Somewhere along the way, that became a race of red-haired giants, helped by a 1931 newspaper story about enormous skeletons in a dry lake bed. The supposed proof was an oversized sandal and a large handprint. No giant skeleton was ever actually produced. Here is what the DNA showed. The Lovelock remains traced to Shoshone and Paiute ancestry. Normal-sized people. They were returned for reburial. The giants were the one thing in that cave that was never real. Number 12 is out in the far desert of southeastern Nevada, in basin and range country, on land the Bureau of Land Management now protects inside a national monument. The Mount Irish Archaeological District covers about 640 acres, and it holds thousands of petroglyphs, some on the order of 3,000 years old. There are bighorn sheep by the 100, geometric lines, human figures. You reach it on rough, unpaved roads, and that difficulty is part of why the carvings survived without being defaced. Then, there is the figure people cannot stop talking about. The Pahranagat style includes a solid-bodied human form with wide-set eyes and a single line running up from the head, like an antenna. It is regionally unique. There is nothing else quite like it across the West. And to modernize, it looks like something that did not come from here. Here is the honest part. It is human. It is indigenous ceremonial art made by ancestral Southern Paiute people over many generations. And its meaning is simply undetermined. The internet turned that figure into an alien a long time ago. The people who carved it were telling a different story in a language we no longer have. That is not the same as a mystery from outer space. It is a mystery of loss, number 11, you can drive to. Most people who stop there have no idea what they are standing on. Donner Pass on the Sierra Crest near Truckee, about 6,800 feet up, 2,000 feet above Donner Lake. On a bench of glaciated granite sit more than 200 petroglyphs, pecked with a hammerstone by the Martis culture somewhere between 1,500 and 4,000 years ago. The researcher Willis Gortner put the site at roughly 3,500 years and noticed something specific. The panels are always placed where you can see the Great Peaks. This was a summit where the territories of the Washoe, the Nisenan, and the Miwok all came together. Here is the detail that stopped us. Within a few hundred yards of those carvings are the railroad tunnels cut through the same granite by Chinese laborers in the 1860s, and the wall of fitted stone they left behind. And this is Donner Pass, the pass where the Donner Party was trapped through the winter and starved. 3 separate chapters of this continent's history stacked in 1 square mile of rock. Gortner thought the carving tradition simply faded once the bow and arrow changed how people hunted, so the sites were abandoned rather than lost. You can stand on all of it at once, almost nobody does. Number 10 is a field of black boulders beside Highway 50, east of Fallon, Nevada. They do not look like much at first. Then you notice the carvings, and then you notice something stranger about them. This was the shore of Lake La Hontan, an Ice Age sea that once covered much of northwestern Nevada and then vanished. People came here at least 8,000 years ago, when these boulders sat at the edge of marshland, thick with plants and game. Grimes Point went on the National Register in 1972. The boulders wear a glossy black coating called desert varnish. It grows back over time, slowly, over thousands of years. And on some of these carvings, it already has. The varnish has completely healed over the grooves. Here is what that means. Those petroglyphs are older than the coating now hiding them. Up the road is Hidden Cave, hollowed out by the same rising lake around 21,000 years ago and rediscovered in the 1920s by 4 boys. Archaeologists have excavated it 3 separate times, 1940, 1951, and 1979 into 1980. It was never a home. It was a place to store things and come back for them. The lake is gone. Its shoreline is still there, written in stone that outlasted the water. Number 9 sits on a plateau north of Bishop on the eastern side of the Sierra that was built by a supervolcano. About 700,000 years ago, the Long Valley caldera erupted and laid down a sheet of pale rock called the Bishop Tuff. The result is the volcanic Tablelands, flat, open, otherworldly country, with the high Sierra standing up behind it. Around 8,800 years ago, the Paiute Shoshone lived here, and they covered the soft rock with petroglyphs. Chalfant, Chittago Canyon, Red Canyon, whole galleries of them out in the open air. Here is the part that did not fit. At Chittago, you can see where someone took a saw to the cliff and cut panels off to steal them. That is why the directions have gone quiet. Land managers and local people stopped publishing where these sites are because the same soft tuff that made the rock easy to carve makes it easy to destroy. If you want to understand them honestly, the Paiute Shoshone Cultural Center in Bishop tells the story, the art, and the displacement of the people who made it. The carving survived nearly 9,000 years of sun, wind, and freeze. It was people they could not survive. Number 8 is the carving that started this whole thing for us. Somewhere on those same volcanic tablelands, on top of a large boulder, is a panel called Sky Rock. Nearly every petroglyph in the West faces outward, toward a person standing in front of it. This one faces up. At the open sky, it sits alone, 5 or more miles from the rich clusters at Chalfont and Chidago. Ancestral Owens Valley Paiute made it, possibly as far back as 8,000 years ago. Beyond that, its history is not well known, and the people who study it are careful to say so. Here is the detail that keeps people coming back. Photographers wait for a clear, moonless night and line the panel up with the Milky Way passing directly overhead. And it fits. As if the whole thing were composed to be read against the stars rather than by anyone on the ground. We are not going to tell you where it is, neither will the guides who know. That silence is deliberate, and after what happened at Chidago, you understand exactly why. A carving that looks up, at a location no one will say out loud. Of everything on this list, it is the one that made us keep going. Number 7 is scattered across the northern Sierra, on flat granite benches along the upper North Fork of the American River, inside the Tahoe National Forest. Researchers have now identified 92 sites of a single distinctive style here, all tied to the Martis culture, dated from roughly 1700 to 950 BC. The North Fork sites alone hold some 1,600 carvings and over 1,000 separate symbols. The largest, at a place called Chickering, has hundreds on its own. The Martis wintered down in the foothills and came up into the high country in summer, and they only ever carved on open, gently sloping bedrock. Never cliffs, never boulders, unlike the rock art of the Southwest. Every site chosen for its view of the named peaks. Here is the idea that is hard to shake. A researcher named Willis Gortner overlaid sketches of certain wavy line glyphs onto contour maps of the actual terrain. They matched. He argued that some of these carvings are maps, not for walking, but for ceremony. Cartography meant to be read in ritual, perhaps a shaman's rite for a successful hunt. Grizzly paw and rattlesnake figures at the sites point the same direction. Many of these places are unmarked, watched over quietly by a group called Friends of Sierra Rock Art. 3,000 years later, we are standing on the bedrock, holding the map, unable to read it. If you are enjoying following this rabbit hole with us, drop a like. It genuinely helps more people find these stories. And tell us in the comments if any of these places ring a bell. Some of you have been there. Some of you grew up nearby. We read everything. Number 6 is the largest rock art site in Nevada, and one of the hardest to actually reach. Lagomarsino Canyon cuts through the Virginia Range east of Reno, near Virginia City. Along a quarter-mile of dark basalt cliff and the talus rubble below it are 2,229 rock art panels. It is one of only 8 rock art sites in the entire state listed on the National Register, and its location is officially address restricted. It was first noted from a local report in 1904 and recorded by the anthropologist Julian Stewart in 1929. But no one fully documented it until a team from the Nevada Rock Art Foundation, led by Dr. Alana Woody, spent 5 years cataloging every single panel. She died in 2007 before the project was finished. It got finished anyway. The site sits at a perennial spring below the cliff, near ground where hunters likely drove game over the edge, which is probably why people returned to carve here for thousands of years. Here is what makes the visit its own story. Reaching the canyon is a 10.5-mile round trip over trackless streambed, soft sand, homesteader ruins, and rattlesnakes with no cell signal. And when you finally arrive, you find the largest gallery of ancient art in the state, wedged between an active mine and the Lockwood landfill. The people who made it chose this canyon on purpose. So, in its own way, did the landfill. Number 5 is a rock you are not allowed to touch, and once you understand it, you will not want to. Chaw'se sits in the Sierra foothills at about 2,400 feet, roughly 9 miles northeast of Jackson in Amador County, in a valley of open meadow and old oaks. It is a slab of marbleized limestone, 173 feet long, and it is covered in 1,185 holes. No one carved those holes. They are erosion. For generations, northern Sierra Miwok women ground acorns into meal on this stone and the pestles slowly bored cup-shaped pits into it. 1,185 of them, the largest collection of bedrock mortars anywhere in North America. Think about what that number actually represents. Each hole is thousands of individual mornings, meals made, families fed, a rhythm of work repeated across centuries until it wore its own record into solid stone. There is more on the same surface. The slab also carries 363 petroglyphs, 2,000 to 3,000 years old, circles, spoked wheels, tracks. Except for one other small site, this is the only place in North America where the grinding mortars themselves were deliberately decorated. It went on the National Register in 1971. There is a museum. The reconstructed roundhouse beside it is a registered California landmark, and it still hosts Miwok ceremonies today. This is not a ruin. It is a place people never actually left. Number 4 is a mountain with a hole in it, and the hole is the whole story. Cave Rock rises about 300 feet over the east shore of Lake Tahoe, on the Nevada side. It is the eroded core of a volcano that existed here millions of years ago. The caves that give it its name were hollowed out by the waves of a prehistoric Tahoe that once stood far higher than it does now. To the Washoe people, it is one of the most sacred places on Earth, a place of origin and by some accounts, a gateway to the underworld. For more than 5,000 years, the tradition held that only medicine people could go there. Everyone else passed around it on a separate trail. The Washoe name is Da'ek Wadapush. It was where a shaman named Henry Rupert drew his power into the 1960s. Then came the road. In 1931, a crew blasted a tunnel straight through the rock. In 1957, they blasted a second one. Traffic on US 50 now drives directly through the heart of a sacred mountain. Later, it became a world-class climbing site, with dozens of bolts drilled into its faces. The Washoe fought that for 2 decades. Here is how it ended. In 2007, a federal appeals court upheld a ban on climbing and held that a native sacred site deserves the same protection as major Judeo-Christian religious ones. In 2017, Cave Rock was formally listed as a traditional cultural property. They could not undrill the tunnels, but they stopped the next desecration cold. The cars still pass through. The mountain is still sacred. Both are true, every single day. Number 3 is a dry lake bed in northwestern Nevada and some of the oldest art on the continent. The Winnemucca Lake Basin is empty now. Cracked white ground, pale limestone boulders shaped like petrified sponges, a horizon with nothing on it in any direction. But carved into that limestone are geometric designs, deep concentric circles, zigzags, wavy lines. Nothing you can obviously read, just pattern, cut with clear intention, on a surface no one has any reason to visit. Here is what makes archaeologists choose their words carefully. Working from research led by the USGS scientist Larry Benson, these carvings appear to be somewhere between roughly 10,500 and nearly 15,000 years old. That would place them among the oldest petroglyphs anywhere in North America. Older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids of Egypt. You cannot carbon date a carving directly, so researchers measured the desert varnish, the slow buildup of manganese and iron oxide, on the glyphs against nearby surfaces of known age, and the numbers came back staggering. When these were made, this was not desert. Winnemucca Lake was a wide, living body of water, and the people who carved here, thought to be early ancestors of the Paiute, lived along its shore. Then the climate turned. The water pulled back and finally disappeared. The people who could moved on, and the carvings stayed, sealed under their varnish, on an empty lake bed now protected by the Bureau of Land Management and held sacred by the Paiute tribes who help interpret it. The land let go of almost everything it had. It kept the writing. Number 2 is not a place you can visit. It is a person. In 1940, 2 archaeologists, Sidney and Georgia Wheeler, were surveying caves about 13 miles east of Fallon, Nevada, ahead of guano mining that threatened them. In one small rocky alcove, they found a man, naturally mummified by the dry air. wrapped in a rabbit-skin robe and woven tool mats, moccasins still on his feet. He had been about 40 years old when he died. They estimated he was 1,500, maybe 2,000 years old. They were wrong by an order of magnitude. When radiocarbon testing was finally run in the 1990s, the number came back at roughly 10,600 years. He was one of the oldest human beings ever found on this continent. The oldest natural mummy in North America, and that is where the fight began. The Falun Paiute Shoshone tribe recognized him as an ancestor. They called him the Storyteller, and they asked for him back under federal law. The government refused, leaning on the science of the day, which held that the very first Americans were not related to modern tribes. The tribe sued. The dispute dragged on for 2 decades, in and out of court. In the end, it was settled by DNA. In 2018, a genetic study led by S.K. Willerslev showed the Storyteller was Native American and dismissed the whole theory of an earlier, unrelated people. It confirmed exactly what the tribe had said from the beginning. He was handed back in 2016 and reburied privately in 2018. His story now lives at the Nevada State Museum and with his descendants, 10,000 years above ground and finally back in it. Some stories do not need a monument. They need to be allowed to end. Start with the sound, which is no sound at all. Black basalt walls close in on both sides of you. The floor of the canyon is scattered with twisted metal, spent ordnance, decades of it. And every surface of rock around you, the walls, the ledges, the fallen slabs, is covered in carvings, thousands of them, in every direction you turn. This is Renegade Canyon. Most people will never stand here. The Coso Range runs between the Sierra Nevada and the Argus Range in eastern California. Across about 90 square miles of it, archaeologists have formally recorded 35,000 petroglyphs, and they believe the true number is well over 100,000. It is the largest concentration of rock art in the entire Western Hemisphere. Renegade Canyon alone, also called Little Petroglyph Canyon, holds more than 20,000 carvings in a stretch about 1.5 miles long. Big and Little Petroglyph Canyons were named a National Historic Landmark back in 1964. About half of those carvings are bighorn sheep. Here is the paradox no one has solved. Biologists say this dry landscape never supported more than about 200 sheep at any one time. Yet the Coso people carved tens of thousands of them across thousands of years. The associated hearths, dwellings, and obsidian tools date the work from roughly 10,000 years ago down to about 1,000. Far more images of sheep than there could ever have been sheep. Why? For half a century, archaeologists have argued, and they still do. One theory says hunting magic, carvings made to summon a successful hunt. Another says a sheep cult, a ceremony to renew the herds as the real animals disappeared. Another says shamanic vision, images brought back from another world by rain shamans. The theories are serious, they contradict each other, and not one of them has won. And the reason all of this survived, pristine and almost untouched, is the strangest turn of all. The Coso Range sits inside Naval Air Weapons Station China Lake. The largest gallery of ancient images on the continent has spent the last 80 years protected by a live weapons testing range. The Navy needed empty, sealed-off land to fire missiles into. So the petroglyphs got a wall of ordnance and no trespassing signs, and they outlasted everyone. You can still see them, barely. A limited number of escorted tours run onto the base each year, out of the Macharango Museum in the town of Ridgecrest. You sign in. You are watched. You do not wander off. More than 100,000 images. And the last people who knew for certain what any of it meant have been gone for a very long time. The canyon does not answer. It just keeps every question anyone has ever carried into it. There are more threads. There always are. Our favorite is the Storyteller at Spirit Cave, because it is the rare mystery that ended the right way. With a person going home instead of into a display case. Now, we want yours. Which of these surprised you most, and which thread should we pull next? Is there a place you know that belongs on a list like this one? If you want to follow along when we find the next one, subscribe.